When Ellie Rae bought the run-down garage on the edge of town for $1,000, she thought she was just buying rust, silence, and maybe a few rats. But 3 days into cleaning, she found a trap door under a cracked slab of concrete. What lay beneath wasn't storage or plumbing or even a bomb shelter. It was a forgotten military command room, sealed off since the 1960 seconds and still humming with power. Before we dive in, let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if stories like this pull you in, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's discovery, it might just rewrite everything we thought we knew. The listing had been up for 19 hours. A single photo, low-res and crooked, showed a squat, rusted building tucked behind a line of tired oak trees just off County Road 18. The description didn't say much. Garage. 2,000 SQFT. Needs work, $1,000. As is. Most people wouldn't even click. But Ellie Rae did. Maybe it was the way the shadows fell in the photo. Or maybe she was just the kind of person who saw broken things and wondered who gave up on them. She'd left her old life behind 3 weeks earlier, packed everything she owned into the back of a borrowed pickup truck, and drove until the road started looking unfamiliar again. The town of Ridgefield wasn't on any map she followed. It just appeared, folded between cornfields and forgotten time. When she saw the garage in person, it looked worse than the photo. The front bay door was dented inward, like someone had driven through it on purpose. Vines curled around broken glass windows. The no trespassing sign had lost its fight with the wind years ago. Still, something in her gut whispered, "This is yours." The seller met her at the corner diner. He was older, stiff hands and stiff conversation, the kind of man who didn't blink twice when she showed up covered in road dust and smelling like axle grease. She didn't ask why it was so cheap. He didn't offer. He slid the deed across the table, still warm from the printer, and she handed over a wad of cash saved from odd jobs and a pawned welding rig. "You got people coming with you?" he asked. "No," she said. The next morning, Ellie unlocked the side door with a key so rusted it scraped like a nailed-down bone. The door groaned open, hinges dry from years of stillness, and the smell hit her first motor oil, mildew, and the kind of damp that only comes from time forgetting a place exists. Light filtered through cracked windows, making dust shimmer like fog caught in a sunbeam. She stepped inside, boots echoing against the concrete floor. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. There were still tools on the walls. Pegboards lined with wrenches, screwdrivers, and socket sets, most covered in a thick film of grime. An old red snap-on toolbox sat in the corner, drawer half open, revealing bolts and fasteners no one had touched in decades. A metal desk, warped and leaning to one side, held a yellowed notebook with smudged handwriting. Shift log, Jan 1967. She flipped through the pages, every entry ending abruptly mid-sentence, like whoever wrote them just walked out. In the far bay, a jukebox stood covered in a tarp. The cloth peeled back easy, and beneath it was a chrome relic of the 1950 seconds, cracked buttons labeled with Elvis and Chuck Berry. She pressed one without expecting anything. Nothing happened. But the act of doing it, of seeing something once full of noise now silent, filled the space with a strange kind of grief. Outside, the wind rattled a metal sign that read L and M, Auto Repair. Inside, Ellie found a workbench with oil, stained gloves, and a coffee mug fossilized with time. There were no pictures, no calendars, no hints of the last person to call this place theirs. Only the bones of machines and the quiet. She stood in the center of the garage, hands on her hips, sweat starting to gather at her collarbone. She should have felt overwhelmed, alone, but all she felt was possibility. Then, something beneath her heel made a hollow clink. Concrete didn't usually sound like that. She stepped back, crouched, and tapped again. There was something under the floor. Ellie knelt, brushing away a thin layer of dust with her sleeve. Her hand moved over the concrete until her fingers caught on an uneven edge, a faint seam running just outside the main lift platform. It didn't look like damage. It looked like a door, a square-shaped panel, barely noticeable unless you were standing exactly where she was. She knocked twice with her knuckles. Hollow, definitely hollow. Her heart began to pound, the kind of rhythm that comes when your instincts feel louder than your thoughts. She grabbed a nearby flathead screwdriver, wedged it into the crack, and pried gently. Nothing moved. She wedged harder. Still nothing. Then she spotted 4 rusted bolts near each corner of the slab, hidden beneath old shop rags and debris. They didn't match the concrete, they were metal set into metal. She stood, grabbed her breaker bar from the truck, and went to work. Each bolt screamed as it turned, resisting every inch, until the final one gave way with a violent snap. Ellie wiped her brow, sweat streaking down her temple, and wedged the crowbar in once more. This time, the slab shifted not much, just enough to whisper that it wanted to open. She dug her boots in and heaved. Inch by inch, the panel lifted, the edges grating against a rusted lip beneath. A cloud of stale, metallic air burst upward, like breath from a sealed tomb. Beneath the slab was a narrow staircase, steep and dark, descending into silence. A metal railing lined one side, and at the top hung a faded yellow sign bolted into the concrete. She leaned forward, squinting through the dust and rust, reading each word out loud. Authorized access, only command operations. She exhaled slowly, the hairs on her arms rising. This wasn't just a mechanic's pit. Something was buried here, and it had waited decades to be found. Ellie stood at the edge of the opening for a long time, one hand on the railing, the other holding her breath. The air that rose from below was cool and dry, tinged with metal and old oil, like the breath of a machine that had been holding its lungs closed for half a century. The stairwell was steep, narrow, and flanked by concrete walls that swallowed sound. Every instinct she had told her to wait, to come back with someone, maybe even call it in. But something stronger, something quiet and stubborn pushed her foot onto the first step. The lights flickered on before she touched the second. Dim amber bulbs embedded in the concrete walls hummed to life in sequence, like a trail inviting her downward. She paused, listening. Nothing. No wind. No hum of machinery. Just the sound of her own breath, echoing back at her from below. She adjusted her flashlight, even though it wasn't needed anymore, and descended slowly, counting each step under her breath like a ritual. 37 steps later, the staircase ended in a heavy metal door, sealed tight. A rotary handle protruded from the middle, painted yellow and chipped to bare steel. Above it, a placard read, Operation Cross Ridge, Level 1 entry. Her fingers hovered over the handle. She didn't know what Operation Cross Ridge was, didn't recognize the name, and hadn't heard a single soul in Ridgefield mention anything about a Cold War-era facility under an old garage. She turned the handle. It groaned, but moved. With one final push, the door swung inward. Beyond it was a hallway long, windowless, and humming with life. Not noise, not motion life. The walls were lined with conduit and panels labeled in military script. The floor was smooth concrete. The air was cool. She stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a soft mechanical click. Not a slam, not a trap. A welcome. Ellie Rae had just crossed into something long, abandoned but not forgotten. The hallway stretched 30 feet before opening into a circular chamber. Ellie stepped cautiously, her boots whispering against polished concrete so pristine it felt untouched by time. The strange part wasn't that the lights were working, it was how they were working. No buzzing, no flicker. Just a constant low glow from recessed strips along the ceiling, like the power had never gone out, like someone had been here yesterday. At the center of the chamber stood a massive round table with old rotary phones, punch cards, and faded manila folders strewn across it, frozen mid-operation. 5 swivel chairs ringed the console, each coated in dust, their positions slightly turned as if people had stood up quickly and never returned. A large screen covered the far wall, cracked but still intact, with the words, "DEFCON 3, Stand By," faintly glowing in green across its surface. Ellie moved slowly, her breath shallow, touching nothing. The atmosphere felt sacred, not like a tomb, not exactly, but something between chapel and engine room. To her left, a secondary panel blinked unexpectedly, a soft pip-pip-pip, accompanied by an analog gauge needle twitching above a label that read, "Local Environment Integrity OK." "What the hell is this place?" she whispered. The room was silent, except for the hum, soft and rhythmic, pulsing through the floor like a heartbeat. She followed it to a side door labeled, "Systems Authorized Personnel Only." Inside, she found racks of machinery, reels of magnetic tape, and a humming server tower covered in dust but still powered. The screen beside it blinked a single prompt, "Enter ID." She stepped back, chilled. Not by the cold, but by the realization that this facility, this command room, had never fully shut down. No cobwebs, no rodent nests, just stillness. She imagined uniformed officers once sitting at these stations, typing commands, watching the world from below, waiting for orders that never came. Ellie swallowed hard. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't supposed to be here. But then again, maybe that's exactly why she was. Ellie moved deeper into the room, drawn toward a sprawling map on the far wall that dominated the space like a mural of paranoia. It wasn't paper, it was made of glass, backlit, and etched with glowing lines that webbed across the country in veins of red, yellow, and white. Each node was marked with a 4-digit code, and an abbreviation she didn't recognize. Ridgefield wasn't even labeled on most maps, but here, it was dead center. CR09, Command Ridge. She stepped closer. Below the map, a row of mechanical toggles and switches sat beneath dust-dulled plastic guards. Each one was labeled Perimeter Signal Relay, Underground Comm Line, Gate Pressure Lock. All toggled off but operational. The switches weren't rusted. They weren't dead. She flicked one lightly with her glove. It sprang to life beneath her fingers with a satisfying, chilling click. Somewhere deep within the walls, something shifted, a faint hiss of air or pressure realigning. To the right of the map stood a file cabinet. Its drawers stuck at first, but yielded when she leaned her full weight into them. Inside, binders, dozens, each marked with dates from the 1,960 seconds through 1,971. Site logs, communications, surveillance reports, cross-ridge protocols. She pulled one labeled Incident File 1969A. Inside were black and white photos clipped to faded typed reports, images of the garage above, with people in military fatigues walking through it. One photo stopped her cold. It showed a man standing in the center of the bay, pointing downward at the very hatch she'd opened. His face was smudged, but his posture alert, tense, prepared, looked like someone about to lock a secret away forever. She closed the file, her hands shaking. Whatever this place was, it hadn't been just backup. It had been active, operational, and then, suddenly not. The last thing she noticed, tucked beneath the folders, was a cassette recorder. A tape was already inside, labeled in red ink. Final log, Commander Fields. Ellie stared at it. Every muscle told her not to press play, but her fingers reached anyway. The recorder whirred softly, the kind of sound that felt too gentle to carry what it was about to say. Ellie stood in silence, one hand resting on the desk, the other hovering near the stop button, just in case. The tape hissed, then clicked, and a voice began, distant and ragged, but steady. "This is Commander Alan Fields. Final entry. August 3rd, 1969. Cross Ridge Facility, Ridgefield, Illinois." Ellie's eyes narrowed. Illinois. Not Georgia. Not Ohio. The government had lied about the name, maybe even the location. Whatever this place was, it wasn't supposed to be found. We've sealed the surface entrance, the voice continued, emotions seeping in around the edges. Garage front will be sold off quietly. Civilian cover. No one up top knows what we built down here. That's the point. That was always the point. There was a pause, the kind that sounds like a man deciding whether to tell the truth or take it with him. We were told this was a continuity bunker. Government relocation. Emergency fallback for nuclear protocol. But it wasn't. Not really. This place was never meant to save lives. It was built to watch something. Ellie's chest tightened. We were tracking it for years. Movement below ground. Heat signatures. Seismic anomalies. Not from another country. From below. I know how it sounds, but the data was clear. Something's been here longer than we have. Something old. The recorder crackled. He coughed, voice weaker now. We were told not to engage. Just monitor. Then the tremors started. Then the malfunctions. Men started seeing things, hearing things. The systems kept rebooting themselves. Not from power failure. From inside. As if they were being told to. And now, the facility's listening. It recognizes voice patterns it shouldn't. Another pause. Then, almost a whisper. We couldn't shut it down. So we buried it. And we walked away. The tape ended with a click. No sign-off. No goodbye. Ellie stared at the recorder, pulse pounding in her ears. The words rang in her head like sirens buried under silence. Not a shelter. A sentinel. Something was still down here. And she had just turned the power back on. Ellie didn't sleep that night. Back in the small room above the garage, the one she'd hastily set up with a cot and a lamp, and the last cup of instant noodles, she stared at the ceiling, while the hum from the facility below thrummed faintly through the concrete like distant thunder. The tape played on a loop in her head. It wasn't meant to save lives. It was built to watch something. By morning, she needed answers any kind. She drove into Ridgefield's town center, just a few blocks of red brick storefronts, a faded post office, and a library that looked like it had been forgotten since Kennedy's era. The librarian was a kind woman named Margaret, hair pinned into a bun, eyes sharp as cold steel beneath her glasses. When Ellie asked if she had records of the L&M garage property, Margaret didn't hesitate. It wasn't always a garage, she said quietly, fingers tracing the library index, like she already knew what Ellie was going to ask. The land was owned by the government until 1965. Then it was auctioned off, no announcement, no public listing, just sold and built over in a month. Why? Ellie asked. Margaret leaned in. People say Cold War experiments. My father used to talk about lights in the woods behind that place. Trucks coming in at night. No markings, no license plates. Ellie listened closely. Did anyone ever go down there? No one who came back with a story they'd tell out loud, she said. But there's a man who might know more. Retired county surveyor. Name's Frank Delaney. Used to map the underground for civil defense. Lives off Route 12. Ellie thanked her and left. An hour later, she knocked on Frank Delaney's door. He opened it slow, eyes narrowing. You're the one who bought that old garage. It wasn't a question. He already knew. Ellie nodded. I went down there once, he said before she could speak. Decades ago. Didn't make it past the first chamber. The walls were too quiet. She frowned. Too quiet? He looked her dead in the eyes. Like they were waiting for you to say something worth remembering. He reached into a dusty cabinet, pulled out an old map, hand-drawn, yellowed with age. He pointed to the garage. That ain't the only tunnel, you know. Ridgefield sitting on top of a whole grid. A grid of what? Ellie asked. Frank folded the map slowly. Things we were never meant to unseal. That night, Ellie returned to the garage, and she went back down. The descent felt different this time, heavier, as if the air itself resisted her return. The lights along the stairwell flickered with slower pulses, like breath catching in a cold chest. Ellie held the railing tighter than before, boots echoing against the concrete, like whispers bouncing back at her. At the bottom, the door opened before she touched it. No resistance, no sound like it had been waiting. The command room looked unchanged, but it felt different as she stepped inside. Her vision blurred for half a second to flicker, like static behind her eyes. The hum that had once felt like power now thrummed deeper, almost like a voice behind the walls trying to shape itself into language. She shook her head. Too much dust, not enough sleep. But then, she saw the console. One of the terminals that had been dark before now blinked with new life. Not a prompt, not a login, a video. The timestamp read the 4th of August 1969, 3:27 a.m. The image was grainy, black and white, but clear enough to see 3 people seated around the round table, all in uniform, all looking like they'd aged 20 years in 1 week. A man, Commander Fields, maybe stood at the head of the table, face drawn and pale. "We vote," he said on the recording. "We either bury this or we activate it. There's no middle ground anymore." The screen froze, then glitched. And suddenly, Ellie wasn't watching the video. She was in it. The room around her dimmed, as if slipping into a shadow of the past. Her hands trembled. She looked down, and for a blink, she wasn't wearing her hoodie and work jeans. She was in uniform. Olive green, fabric rough, a patch that read, "Rae." She staggered back. The illusion broke. She gasped aloud, grabbing the edge of the desk. What the hell is happening? She backed away, heart racing, and reached the stairwell. But as she turned to leave, her foot caught on something beneath the console, a small metal box. She picked it up, hands shaking. Inside, a single item, a data card, thick and labeled in faded pen. Project, inheritance. She didn't know what it meant. But somehow, she knew it wasn't the first time she'd seen it. That night, Ellie dreamed. She was back in the command room, but it was whole, alive, manned, and someone whispered her name. Not Ellie, just Commander. Ellie awoke before sunrise, heart still pounding, the image of the uniformed version of herself flickering behind her eyes like an afterimage she couldn't blink away. She hadn't just dreamed it, she remembered it. Every detail, every wire, every echo in the chamber, every unreadable expression on the face of Commander Fields. And worst of all, the voice that had called her Commander. It wasn't just echo. It had sounded like a system prompt. She didn't know how any of this made sense, only that it did. By noon, she was back underground, hands covered in grease, connecting a new battery to the rusted backup systems, feeding them through her portable inverter. The dead wires didn't resist her, they welcomed her, as if the systems were choosing to come alive again. Because she was there. The command room's console pulsed awake as the circuit surged. A low hum traveled across the walls, like a heartbeat reawakening after a long coma. She reinserted the data card labeled Project, Inheritance into the main terminal. It took a moment, then the monitor blinked. Voice recognition confirmed. Command access granted. Rae. E. Welcome back. Ellie backed away slowly. Back from where? She whispered aloud. Another panel lit up beside the main screen, a button the color of dying embers, softly pulsing like breath. Beneath it, a single line of text. Level 2 Deep Command Access. Press to initiate. She stared at it. Her fingers hovered over the casing. From behind her, deep within the walls, she heard the low groan of metal shifting, like something vast and sealed was moving, reacting. She stepped away from the panel and moved to the map console again. This time, a new series of lights had activated lines connecting the Ridgefield hub to 5 other nodes across the country, each one pulsing, not randomly, in sequence. Ellie didn't know what she was looking at, but she knew what it felt like, a network. Waking up. Maybe Commander Fields had buried this place, just like he said, but he hadn't killed it. It had just been waiting, and somehow, Ellie Rae was the one it had been waiting for. Ellie stared at the pulsing button, its amber glow washing the room in steady, silent waves. It didn't blink like a warning. It breathed. A living thing hidden in plain sight, waiting not to be noticed, but to be remembered. The words etched into the console beneath it still chilled her. Level 2 secure authorization required. System unseal protocol will begin immediately. She should have walked away, closed the hatch, poured concrete over the entry, and never looked back. But that was before the dreams, before the tapes, before she found her name carved in steel, her signature on classified files she had no memory of writing. Now, she wasn't just a visitor in this place. She was part of it, chosen by it, maybe even created by it. Her fingers hovered over the button. For a moment, she imagined pressing it and the whole bunker collapsing in on itself. Lights dying, systems choking, the earth above swallowing it all. But when she finally pressed it, there was no explosion. No chaos, just a click. The lights overhead dimmed, and the familiar hum of the command center deepened, sinking into a lower, almost musical frequency. It vibrated up through the floor, into her legs, into her chest. From the far end of the command room, a panel that had looked like nothing more than wall molding suddenly receded with a hiss. The concrete slid open, revealing a long hallway. Narrower, colder, seamless. The air that drifted out carried a sharp chill, clean and empty, not like a place forgotten, but like one preserved. She took a flashlight, though the lights embedded in the corridor flickered on by themselves as she stepped forward. The concrete underfoot was smooth, untouched. The walls bore no markings, no signage. It was a corridor, made not for function, but isolation. At the end, she found a single door marked D4, its access light blinking green. The others, D1 through D3, D5 through D9, all remained dark, sealed tight. She reached out, breath caught in her throat, and touched the handle. It was warm. Inside was a personal chamber. Sparse, sterile. The cot in the corner was neatly made, blanket folded with military precision. A steel desk faced the far wall. Above it, photographs were pinned in deliberate order. Aerial shots of Ridgefield, maps with topographical grids, and images of the garage above taken decades before she was born. Every photo was stamped with a red-inked phrase, "Inheritance Monitoring." Then she saw it, a uniform folded on the desk. Olive green, faded. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the fabric. On the chest was a stitched nameplate. Rae. It wasn't just a match. It was hers. She turned and saw something even more jarring carved into the concrete above the bed. Faint, but unmistakable. ER. She stumbled back, the room closing in on her like a vice. Her legs found the chair, and she dropped into it, trying to breathe through the rising tide of questions. On the desk sat a clipboard. Beneath cracked plastic, a set of documents labeled Project Inheritance, Reactivation Protocol. The top sheet bore her own signature, unmistakable even the flourish at the tail of the R. This wasn't a mistake. She hadn't stumbled into this place. She had been here, and someone had gone to great lengths to make her forget. There was no more running from it. Not the system, not the bunker, not the truth. Because whatever Operation Crossridge was designed to protect or contain had just been given its signal, and Ellie Rae was the one who'd activated it. The documents on the desk were yellowed but preserved, sealed behind cracked laminate sleeves and clipped neatly to a clipboard with a tag labeled Active Clearance Only. Ellie turned page after page, her hands trembling as pieces of an impossible story unfolded and her name appeared more than once. Operation Crossridge wasn't a survival plan. It was an interface, a tether, a system built not to house government officials during war, but to monitor something beneath Ridgefield, something that predated the Cold War, the government, even the town itself. The earliest records dated back to 1938, referencing anomalies detected in the Earth's crust during land surveys for a now-defunct mining company. Those anomalies turned into seismic pulses, then heat signatures, then noise, frequencies, patterns. The documents used phrases like cognitive bleed, dimensional reverb, and biometric inheritance receptivity terms far beyond Ellie's understanding. But one word kept surfacing, scribbled in margins and underlined over and over again: host. In one memo, written in the rigid block letters of a military hand, Ellie found the following: Subject Rae has demonstrated repeated compatibility with primary node interaction. Genetic sequencing and neural patterning confirm synchronization levels exceeding 92%. Contingency planning recommends amnesiac loop for subject protection until system reactivation protocol is authorized. Amnesiac loop. Her forgetting wasn't accidental. It had been designed. She wasn't here by fate. She had been deployed here. A separate folder, thicker than the rest, was labeled Field Reports, Memory Cycles. Inside were observation logs, some dated just weeks apart, others years. Each one referenced her, sometimes by name, sometimes by number, S. 9R13. She scanned line after line. Subject exhibits localized recall at site entry. Vocal patterns remained stable. Unsealing of command level 1 initiated successfully. Memory sync within acceptable drift. Subject Rae continues to exhibit high emotional resonance to prior cycle artifacts. Recommending non-intervention. System recognizes subject as stabilizing key. Proceeding with quiet reactivation. She was part of a loop, a repeating cycle. Each time she returned, she remembered more. Each time, the facility reached further into her sinking memory, reawakening function. But why? What was the purpose? A final envelope sat at the bottom of the desk drawer. No military markings, no classification stamp. Just her name, Ellie Rae, written in cursive. Inside was a single photograph. She was in it much younger, maybe early teens, standing in front of a chain-link fence, smiling beside a man in uniform. His eyes were kind, familiar. Her father? On the back of the photo, a handwritten message. When the time comes, you'll remember everything. You'll remember who you were and who you're meant to become. And when you do, don't run. Don't fear it. Embrace it. Because this time, you might be the one to finish it. A.F. Alan Fields, the man from the tapes. Commander Fields. Her father? A mentor? A handler? The roles blurred. Ellie folded the photo and slipped it into her pocket. She now understood what Crossridge was. It wasn't a shelter. It wasn't even a prison. It was a womb, designed to hold her until she was ready to wake up. And now, she was. She stood, walked to the terminal, and placed her hand on the biometric pad. Voice authorization? The system asked softly. She didn't hesitate. Commander Rae, begin final integration. Somewhere deep beneath her feet, the bunker stirred. And for the first time in decades, Crossridge opened its eyes. The hum deepened as she descended another set of stairs, ones not listed on any map she had seen. The corridor here was older, colder. Every step she took sounded like it echoed into an abyss, rather than bouncing off walls. Her flashlight flickered slightly, reacting to the electromagnetic currents now swirling around her, invisible but present, like static, charged with intention. At the bottom of the stairs was another sealed door, but this one didn't require a fingerprint or code. As she approached, it unlocked automatically, groaning open like a vault that had been sealed for decades, maybe longer. Cold air, laced with something metallic, rushed out and kissed her skin. The chamber beyond was different. Not a command room, not a sleeping quarters, a sanctum. Walls of curved metal and glowing conduit, with a wide central circle etched into the floor. She moved toward the center, heart pounding, and there, laid out across a central pedestal like a time capsule, were personal effects. A journal, a watch, a dog tag that read Rae, Eleanor, and on the far wall, an inscription carved into the plating. It was crude, etched by hand with something sharp. We never left. The system didn't let us. It remembered for us, Until she came back. Until the memory key turned. Next to it was a row of tall, vertical chambers pods. Stasis-like, sealed from within. 5 of them. 3 were empty. 2 still held figures. Ellie approached the glass, the frost clouding the view. She wiped a circle with her sleeve and saw the face of a woman who looked just like her. Pale. Still. Asleep. Not dead. You're not me, Ellie whispered. You're another version of me. One chamber blinked. A console nearby flared to life. Text scrolled across the screen. Genetic resonance confirmed. Cycle 14. Successful. Core alignment 97.3%. She backed away. Her mind reeled. Crossridge hadn't just kept her here. It had cloned her, rebuilt her, reinserted her into the loop, again and again until the result finally aligned. Until she aligned. Until now. She wasn't here to remember. She was here to replace. The door behind her sealed shut. Lights dimmed, and the system spoke. Asterisk, asterisk. Welcome home, Operator Rae. Final sequence ready. Ellie stared at the pods. The inscription. The woman inside who could have been her sister, her shadow, her ghost. She stepped forward, fists clenched. This wasn't legacy. It was entrapment. But now that she knew, she had one last chance to break it. One final override. A choice only the real Ellie Rae could make. And this time, she wasn't going to forget. Ellie stood before the console, breath shallow, skin prickling with the weight of everything she'd uncovered. Behind her, 5 stasis chambers stood in silence. 2 still occupied. The other 3 cracked open and empty. Ghosts of herself, echoes of failed cycles, versions of Ellie Rae that had almost made it, but not quite. And now, the system declared her the one. The console pulsed with soft white light, awaiting a command. She approached, eyes scanning the interface. Every input she saw matched the ones from the Level 1 command room upstairs, except this one had no failsafes, no redundancies. There was only one prompt, blinking steadily. Final sequence ready. Awaiting core decision. Below it were 2 buttons. No explanation. No manual. Just etched names. Continue. Vertical bar. Rewrite. She stared at them. The silence in the room stretched long, pregnant with the memories of every version of her that had stood here before. The decision wasn't tactical. It was philosophical. What did she believe in? Continuation of a loop that had monitored the anomaly for generations, possibly centuries, or breaking the loop, and risking whatever lay beneath Ridgefield awakening unobserved. The floor beneath her vibrated faintly. A low, rhythmic thrum pulsed through the chamber walls. Not mechanical, biological. The anomaly was stirring. Ellie stepped back from the panel and paced. Her mind raced through everything she'd read, the project inheritance files, the observation logs, the journals of those who tried and failed. Commander Fields. The stasis pods. Even the strange pull she felt on day 1, standing over the trapdoor in the garage floor. They had built Crossridge to hold a mirror up to time, to human consciousness, to fate itself. And each cycle, they had tried to find a version of her capable of making this one decision, not because she was special, but because she was stable. She looked at the occupied pods again. The one with the woman who looked just like her stirred faintly, fog gathering behind the glass. A twitch of the fingers. A flutter beneath the eyelids. She was waking up too. The system couldn't support 2 cores. One would override the other. Ellie turned back to the console. Her hand hovered over the continue button. Maybe this was what was safest. Let the system do what it had always done. Let the anomaly stay watched. Let the next version pick up the baton. But then she heard it. The system's voice again, calmer now, almost maternal. Core stability verified. Option lock in 60 seconds. Please confirm outcome. A timer started to count down. Ellie's mind flashed to the first time she turned a wrench on her own. Her father's hands guiding hers. Her mother's voice reading her bedtime stories about astronauts and deep-sea divers. The diner in Ridgefield. Margaret the librarian. Frank Delaney and his faded maps. These weren't simulation fragments. These were hers. She had made a life. She was more than a system's result. With 10 seconds remaining, she moved. She pressed rewrite. The chamber lights flared. The stasis pods hissed. Warning klaxons tried to engage, but the system's voice remained eerily calm. Sequence accepted. Memory loop terminated. Core tether released. Facility functions suspended. Ellie braced herself, half expecting the place to explode, or the anomaly to rupture the floor beneath her. But instead, everything slowed. The thrum in the walls faded. The light returned to soft white. The stasis pods powered down. The one holding her other self unlocked. The door creaked open. Inside, the other Ellie Rae, paler, thinner, quieter, collapsed forward. Ellie rushed to catch her. The woman's eyes opened, glassy, lost. "I remember. Snow," she whispered. "And the garage, and your hands." Ellie held her close. "It's okay. You're free. Because this time, the loop didn't restart. It ended. The system shut down around them. For the first time in decades, silence in Crossridge meant peace, not pause. The console went dark. The doors unlocked. The air, once cold and electric, now felt human, real. Ellie helped her double stand, both of them leaning into one another for balance. They walked slowly toward the stairwell, toward the surface, toward the world, waiting above a world, untouched by loops, codes, or simulations. Above ground, the sky had begun to shift. Morning crept in, gold, brushing the tops of the trees around the garage. Ellie opened the trap door and pulled them both into the light. The air hit different now. It wasn't just the cold breeze from the early autumn morning, or the way the light painted gold across the dust-laced windows. It was the absence of hum, that constant electric throb of something ancient and mechanical that had lived under Ellie's skin since she opened the hatch. Gone now. Silent. Dead. She stood on the garage floor again, her hands braced on her knees, lungs pulling in big, desperate breaths, like someone just dragged from the deep end of a pool. Her double, the other Ellie, sat propped against the wall nearby, wrapped in an old shop towel, still shivering, still quiet. They hadn't spoken since resurfacing. Not because there was nothing to say, but because neither knew how to begin. How do you talk to someone who is you but also isn't? How do you explain the sensation of rewriting your own destiny like a line of corrupted code finally debugged? The silence stretched until it became comfortable, familiar, even. They listened to the creak of the old rafters above, the gentle rattle of leaves outside. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out sharp, high, beautiful. Ellie stood and paced the garage. Everything here felt different now. The oil stains, the forgotten wrenches, even the light filtering through the cracked window had a weight to it, like the space had been waiting for her to return not as a guest, but as its owner. Not just the woman who had bought a $1,000 ruin, but the one who came back with all of herself. The system underneath Ridgefield was gone. Dormant. Whether forever or for now, she didn't know. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let anyone restart it. She walked to the back office and found a roll of plastic and a bucket of concrete mix left from when she first tried to patch the broken wall. Now, she'd use it to seal the hatch. Not because she wanted to hide from it, but because it wasn't hers to open anymore. "You're going to bury it?" the other Ellie asked, voice faint. "Not bury," she replied. "Just close the chapter." Together they worked in silence, cutting plastic, mixing concrete, pouring it slowly over the hatch until the outline disappeared beneath a smooth gray surface. They didn't mark it. They didn't need to. They would always remember where it was. As the concrete set, Ellie sat beside her twin and offered her a cup of instant coffee. The other Ellie accepted it like she'd been waiting her whole life for something that warm. They sipped, in silence. "You think it'll stay quiet?" the other asked. Ellie shrugged. Maybe not. But if it doesn't, I won't be alone next time. The other Ellie gave a faint smile. I don't even know who I am now. You're me, Ellie said. But you don't have to be me. You can start wherever you want. Go somewhere new. Change your name, or keep it. Whatever feels right. They sat there for hours, watching light move across the walls. Eventually, Ellie stood, walked to her workbench, and pulled a small metal object from the drawer. The dog tag. Rae, Eleanor. She clipped it to the old keychain, the same one she used the day she first unlocked the garage. Then, for the first time in weeks, she opened the garage door wide. Sunlight poured in, blinding and bright. A car rolled by. A kid on a bike waved. The world kept turning, like it always had, and now Ellie Rae was part of it again. Whole, unplugged, ready. Weeks passed. The concrete dried fast, but the story settled slow. Ellie Rae didn't leave Ridgefield. Not right away. The town she had once driven into as a stranger now held her like an old friend with rough hands and a soft heart. Margaret from the library brought over stacks of old Cold War documents, for curiosity's sake. Frank Delaney visited once, then once a week, dropping off diagrams and sharing long-forgotten stories he'd been holding onto for too long. The other Ellie, who eventually chose to go by Nora, rented the back room in the garage and began spending afternoons at the town diner. She said it helped to be around people, even if she didn't say much. The rhythm of Ridgefield, slow, human, unprogrammed, gave her something she never realized she needed. Time. They didn't talk about the bunker much. The system, the anomaly, the failed cycles. Some days Ellie doubted it had ever happened at all, until she caught a flash of herself in a mirror and saw the knowing in her own eyes, a depth not born from pain, but from remembering it. Instead, they built. It started small. A rusted-out Chevy that Leo, a high school kid from down the road, brought in hoping to restore. Then came Mrs. Carter's old Jeep, then a station wagon from a nearby farm. Word spread. People came not just because Ellie fixed things, but because they felt better just being in the shop, like something invisible had shifted in the air. Like being near, Ellie Rae reminded them that even broken things can hum again. One morning she opened her laptop and found an unread folder labeled Project Drembold on the desktop. She hadn't put it there. Inside were CAD files, sketches, parts lists, even paint swatches. At the top of the notes was a handwritten message scanned into the first page. One final build. For when you're ready. A.F. Ellie sat back in her chair and stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved. That week, she cleared the center bay. She ordered parts. She dusted off her father's old tool cart and rearranged it like he used to keep it. Nora watched from the doorway, arms crossed, not asking questions, not needing to, because she understood. Ellie wasn't fixing a car. She was building a legacy. She called it the engine. Not a vehicle, not a project, a symbol. She designed it from the ground up, a fusion of everything she'd ever learned, every dream she'd ever shelved. A car with no brand, no model, no VIN. A one-of-one expression of memory, motion, and future. Every weld held the weight of her history. Every torque was a testimony. And when she turned the key for the first time, the garage filled with the low, resonant purr of something not mechanical but alive. The sound of beginning. People gathered. Not for a show, not for fame, just to see it, to feel it. Nora stood beside her, quiet, hands in her jacket pockets. You could take it and disappear, she said softly. I could, Ellie agreed. Will you? Ellie looked at the open road beyond the driveway. At the map she'd pinned to the wall with places circled she'd never been. Then she turned back to the garage. The people, the life she'd made forged from echoes and concrete and courage. No, she said. She handed the keys to Leo. His hands trembled. I didn't build it just to drive, she said. I built it so someone else could believe they were meant to start something too. That night, she sat on the hood as Leo carefully drove the engine down the main street, every head turning. The chrome caught the street lamps. The red finish shimmered like memory. The engine hummed like a heartbeat passed from hand to hand. And Ellie Rae, the woman who had once walked into a silent garage with no plan and a $1,000 title, watched it all unfold. Not as someone who needed to be remembered, but as someone who had helped others remember themselves. She didn't need recognition. She had release. Later, after the crowd left and the shop lights dimmed, Nora walked in and handed Ellie a small box. Old, rusted, the lock broken. Ellie opened it slowly. Inside was the Street Christopher medal, the same one she'd lost, or thought she had. "I found it in the wall," Nora said. "Buried behind the breaker panel, like someone stashed it for you to find later." Ellie held it in her palm. The medal was warm. She clipped it to her keychain. Then she smiled. Because some legacies don't end in thunder. Some just keep moving. Like engines. Like echoes. Like memory.